Hello and welcome to another episode of
The Plotter Looms.
Plottings. And today we have a very interesting topic for
A twofer.
parents.
It's technically a twofer because most of you might not have kids, or maybe you don't.
Yeah.
Maybe you do. So we are doing a 2-for-1 sale, a special.
So
We will talk about
kids watches. Watches
kids
for
watches.
children.
But because that is a fairly niche crowd, we will also talk about the pros and cons of Quartz,
Yeah.
which
So
should apply to everyone.
now, if you have children, you said that your daughter already has a small watch collection. So what
It is not small. It's the same size as my watch collection.
So a big watch collection. So what brought you to the idea? Is your daughter, because you are obviously a watch nerd, did she think, oh, when daddy is so excited about watches, I should also have watches? Or did she just this osmosis?
No. I think so. Basically, what happened was we were walking through a mall once, and my daughter was maybe 1 at the time, and we saw a very nice little pink flick flack. It was 100 dirhams. And I said, sure, why not? We bought it, and it fit her, so I thought it was cute.
Yeah,
that's where it started, and then she started wearing it, and then we started with let's learn how to tell the hours.
Mm-hmm.
So she learned how to tell the hours fairly early, I think maybe 2 years old. Then the minutes were a little bit harder because I essentially, with hours, you tell her, okay, whatever's in between is the previous hour. And she learned that. The minutes, it took her a while, but she figured it out. I think she figured that out when she was maybe 3 or something. In the meantime, she had gotten both of the Hodinky limited edition flick flacks as well. So she was up to 3 watches, all of which that I bought, right? She had no say in, essentially, right? Then she wanted a watch.
Okay.
And that was kind of the first sign that she liked watches. She picked out a watch. We were at Dubai Mall in the Swatch boutique, and she picked out, because one of her favorite things on my watches is a rotating bezel with the clicking. She just loves playing with the bezel.
It's a fidget spinner.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
So she's actually wearing this one today. So she found a flick flack with a rotatable bezel, and it does the clicking and everything. It's unidirectional. So that one she really liked. And then she wore that for an absolute huge amount of time. And then this was probably, she's now 6 or so at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I said to her, because she wanted a G-Shock. That was her next thing. She said, I want a G-Shock.
Yeah.
And I told her, you can get a G-Shock when you learn how to tell time perfectly. Like it has to be, I called them a cheater watch, right?
Right.
And I said, once you can tell time absolutely perfectly every single time without fail, then you can get a digital watch.
Right.
So that took some time. So she then got another watch. She wanted a watch because the flick flacks aren't waterproof. So at this point, she has no waterproof watch. Now they're 30 meters and I'm not going to say don't go swimming in it. So she says, okay, I really want a watch that I can swim in. So I got her a Casio. Essentially, it's a very tiny, like 20 millimeter Casio it was 200 meters water resistant, perfect. She can swim in. And then she actually learned how to tell time on that. So she got really, really, really good at telling time.
Good.
So therefore I got her a G-Shock. She loved it. It was the Baby G in pink. So she was a huge fan. This is the newer one. The B, I think, is the BLX 565. Which is the smaller version. And then she ended up telling me one day randomly, I want a watch that is an adult watch.
Wow.
And by now she knows how to tell time perfectly. She looks at my Speedmaster, for instance, or any of my watches, and she can tell time. And remember,
she didn't mean adult content on the watch, but just
no. I'll tell you what an adult watch is exactly. So, but first, the thing was, I told her if she wants a watch that has in her mind, a grown-up watch is made of steel.
Okay.
As opposed to plastic, all the flick flacks and the G-Shock is rubber and plastic.
Sure.
She wanted a steel case, no numbers anywhere, just baton indices.
Oh, okay.
And a leather strap.
Yeah, that's very adult. I mean, grown up.
And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I said, okay. So I found a Casio for and it's amazing how cheap these are. I think it was like 40 dirhams. And ticked all of the boxes, has a pink strap, maybe once again 20 millimeters, and his baton indices, right? So then she got really, really good at telling time, because now the other day I was wearing my watch and I was wearing the Speedmaster, which the Speedmaster is notoriously hard to read because it's a very busy dial.
Yep, there's a lot going on.
And she just grabs my arm, twists it, says it's 5:34, and I'm like, is it? And she was absolutely spot on. So I feel like super proud that she actually knows how to do all this stuff. She says everyone in her class has no idea how to tell time. So they were learning this year. She's in year 4. They were learning how to tell time. And she's like, this is ridiculous.
This is weird, right? Because in the 4th, that's late. That's late to tell the time.
But you don't need to when it's a digital dial, right? So now, essentially, she did get one more watch after this, and this was also her choice. She found a watch at the Flick Flack store in Belgrade when we were there this summer, and it was a all blacked out watch with a silver sparkly heart in the middle. And she said, I want a black watch because it would go with everything.
It's very fashion conscious.
I'm like, what is? So it's actually like logic, but the thing is, she has an 8 watch box and all 8 slots are taken now.
Yeah, that's it. Now she has to have the same mental gymnastics of
no, she does.
one in, one out.
She says, I feel, and it's so funny, she wakes up and she's like, I want to wear this watch today. I have no idea, because she's wearing a school uniform.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense what she's matching it with.
Yeah.
But every day she wears a different watch.
Nice.
So it's really funny. But as a Christmas present, I did buy her an Apple Watch. Wow. She's getting an Apple Watch. She got the SE, which I thought was appropriate for her. So this is the 38mm one. So
it's the smallest, right? That you can.
Yeah, it's the smallest one they make, but it's technically the same size as the 40, or the 41 now, right? It's just the dial is smaller, I think. I don't know if it's actually physically smaller. I'll do some caliper tests. But so she's got that coming as well. So
nice.
Because that has to be on a charger, it doesn't have to be in the watch box. So I'm okay with this.
Oh, okay. It's an extra one, yeah. Okay.
No, it gets better. It gets better. So now she has asked me if I can get her a new strap for the Casio, and it has like 12 millimeter lugs. And I'm like, I have no idea where I'm going to find a 12 millimeter strap, but I'm going to try to find one.
Yep.
So could you imagine a little 12 millimeter NATO or something? Be hilarious.
Yeah, that's sweet. For this tiny wrists. Yeah. What to do.
Yeah. But so once again, that's kind of the whole idea here is I was surprised, and I urge the rest of you, if you have kids, buy them watches.
I think when you're first exposed to time passing digitally, I think because I didn't, right? So while we did have already digital watches, there were still like these, those alarm clocks that where they flip over, the flop, flop.
Yeah.
Or at the airport where you have these big
table
boards stuff where it rattles through it. So I think the passing of time going in a circle, right? Going around, and it's just like the Earth's rotation and everything else, like the stars and the sun coming up and going down. It has a bit of this connection to nature, of what actually really happens. So how time is passing, and also this whole a quarter, what is half an hour? These kind of things are a bit more visually understandable when you are not taking it digitally, I think it makes a bit more sense. And I think the passing of time has a bit of a different meaning to you, because it's just feeling like this literally the clock is ticking, right?
But as I mentioned this before in a previous episode, but I feel absolutely the same way, because when I look at my watch right now, right, I glance down and I'm looking at you again. That doesn't, I still don't know what time it is right this second. It's processing in my brain. So I'm like, okay, it's 2:10, right? I get an idea, and is it? No, it's 2:05. But, I'm in the ballpark, right? I just glanced at it for a second. But the thing is, you cannot do that with a digital watch. You look at it, you get an exact number, and that doesn't equate to a feeling of where am I throughout the day, or B, when I look at my watch, my analog watches, I often look at where the minute hand should be, or where I'm expecting the minute hand to be next. So let's say I have a class that I'm teaching, and I know that the class ends at 45, right? I glance, I'm like, okay, we're still at 30. We got 15 more minutes, right? This is split second math right there, right?
Yeah, and because you haven't really, it's just like the experience.
It's a pie chart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But when I do this, I sometimes wear my G-Shock, and it'll be like, okay, it's 44. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? Right? And then I start saying like, okay, 45 minus 34.
You're basically translating it in your mind into
from analog. Yes, and that's the problem. Is I've realized that it is much slower, and it's much less of a feeling based. It's more of a calculated based. Sentiment.
I think so. It's less intuitive. I think it's really just you have the passing of time, and that's why I think when you look at these the time going around, when you have a 24-hour watch, which would probably be the most useful one, where we have this, where this like the daylight and the nighttime, so they would have the passing of the time even better than the 12 hours that we have, but. What is it called? Meistersinger? They have these 24-hour dials and all of this stuff.
The what's it called? Does it? Breitling has it with the cosmonaut. Sorry.
Yeah, and there's a new Patek that has the same one, right? That also has a 24-hour dial. Calatrava. Anyhow,
sure.
So that's I think that's very good. So please encourage your kids to learn the time in an analog way, because I think it is for their mental development and for the future of just telling the time and understanding time. It's better. It's just better, I think, personally.
This has been a public service announcement from the Lume.
Please do it. It's good.
No, I think it's fine, and then get them into the hobby, right? Because once again, at any point you could use a digital clock, but learning an analog clock is going to be difficult and more rewarding.
And the next thing is, if you are, for example, in an airport and you have all of these clocks, and there are analog clocks, right? I mean, you do have digital clocks, especially when you look at the arrival and departure table. You always have the current time, and that's usually digital. But you have these airport clocks. There could be from Ulysse Nardin, from Rolex, from Omega. It depends on the airport and which kind of contract they have.
Who's sponsoring it. Yeah.
Who's sponsoring it. But you have all of these different watch brands putting big, fat analog clocks everywhere. And if you walk through a city, you have a lot of analog clocks on clock towers, on churches, on other government buildings. And so usually they are analog. There is no digital clock somewhere. So it makes sense to know how to read this, I feel.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah. And then, because nowadays you have even grown-up people, adult people, who have no idea how to tell the time on an analog clock, and that is just shocking that exists these days. Yeah, that people cannot read the time on an analog watch face. That is just crazy.
All right. Now, after this public service announcement, so by the way, the whole point of this was, kids and watches. If you want to get your kids a watch, it's unbelievably cheap. There's absolutely tons. So Ben Clymer's wife, Cara Barrett, made this Parchy time. That one was a really good one. The Flick Flacks are fantastic. Swatches, of course, are great. Casio has an absolute ton of analog watches they call them ladies' watches or so, but I mean, they could be in any color. They're just small. They're like around 20 millimeters. Tons of those. They cost about 50 dirhams, which is ridiculously cheap. G-Shocks make all sizes. There's a whole slew of stuff you could look into there. So there's quite a bit of stuff that you could look at for kids.
Yeah.
So find one they like. Yep. All right. Cool. Now moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
I noticed we didn't do a wristwatch check.
Most of these watches for kids are quartz watches.
Did we do a wristwatch check?
Huh? Oh, my wristwatch check. Here, it's the Timex Hodinkee Waterbury. Which is a very, very nice watch. Look at it. It has the 3, it has the 3, the 6, and the 9. It has, does it have the 12? No, it has a triangle at the 12. It is a lovely case, I must say. It's really cool. And it has this amazing clicks. I mean, I don't know if you can hear this.
No, it did.
Yeah,
it edits it out.
Anyhow, it is clicking like mad.
I was just going to ask you that, if it's a friction bezel, because I do have an old Timex dive watch that I wore religiously from about 2010 until about 2016, 17 was my only watch.
All right.
Sorry, 2014. So 4 years roughly. And it was absolutely fantastic. It looked very similar to yours. It was a bit smaller. It was a 37 or 38 mil watch. So even then, I guess I was into smaller watches, which is kind of funny. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic watch. I loved it. Yeah, that's kind of it.
So what are you wearing?
I'm wearing my also Hodinkee.
Oh.
I'm still wearing my Hodinkee Oris Divers 65 with the caliber 400.
Yeah. So sorry.
Bear movement. The bear movement.
The bear movement. I really like this, the bear movement. I think that's super sweet.
Good. Yes.
Didn't we ask this if they actually designed it this way or just figured it out later? And what was the answer?
We asked. Yes, they did.
So they designed it like this, or they figured it out later?
They designed it on purpose like this.
On purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very sweet.
So
yeah. So coming to the second topic, kids' watches are mostly quartz. Daddy needs to change the batteries because most of these watches do not have solar charging, right? Because that's why they're so cheap, right? The watches for kids, most of them. But if you're coming to quartz, we have to talk a bit about what you already have, and this is this here in your phone
pocket.
In your pocket. If you have an iPhone, and it's pretty similar for Google as well, Apple doesn't do things half-baked most of the time. But in your pocket, you have a watch that is so precise that it's, and I can check this right now for you because I have an app that actually considers the runtime between the time service and what is the current time, blah, blah, blah. It's about 0.2 of a second off from the actual time service because of the runtime of the signals. And it knows that. So your iPhone is synced to about 15 Strata 1 class atomic clocks that actually Apple runs around the world to minimize the latency, right, of the signal time in the internet. And that is actually pretty amazing. Stratum level 0 is an atomic clock that is obviously 1 second in a million years wrong. Stratum level 1 means it's directly connected to that reference time. And then these servers, and this is what the Stratum 1 servers are that Apple runs, are then connected to your iPhone. So your iPhone actually gets the time from one of these 15 Stratum 1 servers, which makes your iPhone a Stratum 1 level time device, which is insane, right? This is a reference time that your phone checks a couple of times a day and adjusts the time in the Quartz watch that is actually in your phone, because your phone has a Quartz watch built in. And this is the cool thing. Every electronic device that you use, most of them have a Quartz watch built in. Your computer, your laptop, your iPad, your iPhone, everything that has a time, that displays the time. My mixer, my Rodecaster Duo with which I'm recording this episode, has a time or a clock built in. They have batteries. They run even when the computer is switched off, so that they actually keep relatively normal time. But because in the computer world, you know this probably because you're old, Martin. When we not as old as me, but you're old.
Yeah.
So in old the old times, if you had a server and the clocks in the server would drift, because they are also quartz watches, not the best ones. And so over time, they would drift. So they would go, sometimes they were minutes off. But if you have a server that actually writes down specific times, files, or writes into databases where it needs to have the accurate time, you need to make sure that these clocks are set properly. And that's why we have pre-network time protocol servers. We had these little devices that would take radio signals from long wave radio in certain areas. In Germany and in UK, you have these areas. You have in Colorado, in the US one, 2 in Japan and 2 in China. They would send out the radio signal via radio waves, this time signal from an atomic clock. And that would then be able to read this. You connect this to your server, and the server would then adjust every 2 hours or 3 hours from this signal to make sure that it has the correct time. Because otherwise, if you write stuff in databases, it could be very important if you have enough money in your account before the money goes out, or other things, right? You have to have the right time in all of these things, and you have to have it synchronized across the world. And your bloody iPhone does that perfectly fine. You never have to set your watch on your iPhone. If you switch your your phone on airport mode or aircraft mode or whatever it is here, this way you switch everything off.
Airplane
no Wi-Fi,
mode,
no
yes.
Bluetooth, no mobile phone. Then you will see the accuracy of your built-in Quartz watch, which probably is about 15 seconds plus minus per month. So which is the normal Quartz accuracy that you have. And that is the intrinsic accuracy of your Quartz watch. That's probably the same in the little watches for your kids. Sometimes you could be surprised. I have a watch box with my G-Shocks, and when they go into time-saving mode after a couple of days in the dark, they actually have they run on their own quartz crystal. They are not syncing anymore via Bluetooth with my phone. And when I open them up after 2 months, I can see very funny time differences between them. Sometimes they're off by half a minute, or even depending on what kind of watch. Old watches, I have a 15-year-old quartz watch, because they age over time, these quartz crystals in the watches, so they go off. And so one is then 2 minutes off in a couple of months. So that's a lot, right? It's not as accurate as you think they would be. Because if you have a really good watch, like a Rolex, that is guaranteed, if you wear it continuously, plus minus 2 seconds maximum per day wrong, that means that over a period of a month, let's say 1 second is the average that it's off, and in a day, you have a half a minute that the watch might be off. In reality, it's very often less than that, because sometimes it offsets with going fast one day and then slow the other day because you're more active or you did some other things. So mechanical watches are actually not too bad, right? Sometimes when people say, hey, every cheap Happy Meal, McDonald's Happy Meal quartz watch that you get in a Happy Meal is more accurate than your Rolex. No, it's not true. Very cheap quartz watches are sometimes not as accurate as you think. They might be off by minutes in a month, which your mechanical watch is not. So quartz is great, and it has a tendency of being, it can go up to 1 second a year, plus minus, if you have a really, really good Citizen Chronomaster, the Citizen high-end movement, where you have a deviation of 1 second in an entire year without it syncing to anything, just inside that little thing that you wear on your wrist. And that we can build a device that is keeping time so well is absolutely amazing. It's mind-blowing. And that's why I think quartz watches don't get the
love that they deserve,
because that is so amazing.
I still, okay, This is kind of the whole point of this episode is we're going to talk about whether we agree or disagree with this. Ralph is clearly a very big proponent of quartz watches. I, on the other hand, not so much. I understand and I admire, let's say like is a strong word. I admire the capability that Citizen and these, Seikos are able to do with quartz watches.
Seikos. Yeah, very good.
However, I don't like, for instance, the automated nature of a spring drive, a Grand Seiko spring drive. At the end of the day, it's still relying on a quartz crystal. I don't like the tick, tick, tick of quartz watches, right? I have found a caveat to this, and it's generally like the Cartiers when they don't have a second hand.
Yes.
I don't feel as much hatred towards them. We'll say that way.
Okay.
But however, you still hear the tick, 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 and you still see the movement of the minute hand is not as smooth as it would be on a automatic watch or a
usually in order to
watch.
save time. Sometimes they're going like in a second interval, the minute hands, and sometimes depending on how they're driven by different motors and other
like every
things,
minute or something they click. Yeah.
Every 10 seconds, every 20 seconds, they move a specific bit forward. But there's still it's still a gear train in a normal analog quartz watch.
Well, most of these are plastic gears, right? They're not even real gears. I don't know what a Cartier quartz movement would look like, what kind of gears they would be utilizing.
Most of them are used normal ones. I mean, the ones that are higher end, they have even jewels. I mean, they have 7, 8 jewels on it.
Yeah.
So they're actually pretty good in regards to what they actually are. There's certain things. Sometimes you have these watches that are basically like the spring drive, for example, where it's a completely mechanical watch driven by a hairspring. There is no battery inside, right? Yeah. There is only energy that's being consumed right in the moment it's generated, just to keep the quartz crystal spinning and then to break basically the power that goes from the mainspring into the hands, into the gear train, just to break it via magnets. It's still, the hands are driven by a mechanical spring.
Yes, of course.
So that way it's pretty cool.
It's just regulated by the quartz crystal.
Correct.
And not
the regulating organ is quartz assisted.
Ding, 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 ding of a pellet fork. I like it. That's why I like watches. I like the little engines that do their thing.
Yep, and me too. That's why we are in this hobby, right? I mean, in my watch collection, there are obviously mostly mechanical watches because I think these.
What do you have that's quartz? What do you have?
But sorry,
what quartz watches do you own?
Well, I do have a few G-Shocks, which are proper digital quartz watches.
As we say, G-Shocks don't count. That goes for everything.
Yes, exactly. And I do have and this is the cool thing. I like. Yeah, most of them, my quartz watches have a few things that I really like about quartz watches is I don't like to change batteries. That's one of the things that always...
But you're talking about the G-Shocks again.
Yes. No, and also my other ones. My Citizens, I have 2 Citizens there. I have one that is called a perpetual calendar and one that is a satellite wave. And these 2, they have also solar charging, eco drive, whatever it's called, because I really like that independence that they actually, you need to take care of them. That means you need to charge them every now and then, put them on the windowsill, just give them some sunlight, right, for a day or 2 so that the batteries are full. You shouldn't let them go too deep because that's not good. These batteries are made to be pretty fully charged all the time. So you just... don't let them go run very, very low. It's not good for them. Then they can last really 20 years. So with these watches, I like usually that they are solar powered. I like if they can get their time assisted from somewhere. That would be cool, either via Bluetooth or via long wave radio or via GPS, which I have one watch that can do that. So when it gets enough light, because it's very intensive, calculation intensive to actually, read or identify the radio signals, read the antenna. It basically takes the time every once or twice a day from the GPS satellites.
Yeah.
And then just corrects itself. And it can also, when you travel, you can press a button and then it just locates itself and sets its own time zone correctly. And then obviously sets the time to that time zone. That's what your G-Shocks do as well when they are via Bluetooth connected to your phone. If your phone just realizes, oops, I'm in a different time zone, and then your watches automatically get switched to that time zone as well, which is all pretty cool and nifty. So I like that. So that's for me my little nitpicks. I want solar charging, and I want ideally that the watches can somehow adjust themselves to the proper time.
All right. I, on the other hand, have a G-Shock as well. That is my only Quartz watch aside from my Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
The Apple Watch, once again, I generally only wear at night. Or within the confines of my house, or if my phone is dead, because I have the cellular package on it. So therefore, I found out that it's very nice when you need to go out, but your phone is dead and then you have the watch on you. So that definitely does help. Yeah. So generally, if I want to go swimming, that's another time where I would take the Apple Watch because I don't want to take the phone in the pool and I don't want to leave it on the table in the sun and it would overheat. So the Apple Watch is good for these things.
Yeah.
The G-Shock serves one vital and extremely crucial job. It sits next to my watch box. And that is the time
the
that
reference
I set.
Time.
The reference time. It is solar as well. I totally agree. I don't want to deal with any type of batteries. So this one is solar. It is not... It is, what's it called? The, what do they call it? Multiband 6. However, we don't get multiband 6.
No, we don't have a long wave time signal here.
Yeah. So therefore it is manually set. But I do set the, all the other watches, anything I take out of the watch box will be set against the G-Shock. So it sits there, it's on a table, it's facing the window. So it's always topped up, the battery. And so it serves a very important function in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, and Quartz is an innovation that came. I think. Yeah, I mean, of course, obviously, we have Seiko, who actually destroyed nearly the mechanical watch industry to a certain extent. But it was actually developed in different areas in different countries. I think it was developed in the 50s or 60s already, the principle of it.
So the Swiss were actually working on the beta movement, right?
Exactly.
Which was a bunch of Omega and Rolex and a bunch of God knows who else came together to make this beta movement.
Yeah, they made it as a reaction, right? Because before they actually already researched on it and all of this stuff, but really popularization was from the cheap ones coming from Japan at the time. But
that was 1960, though. That was 1960. Yeah. So at this point, remember, in 1969 was when, I think it was 69, no?
I think
when,
so.
When Seiko made the first publicly available Quartz watch.
And
the importance there is publicly available, right?
Correct.
So this Beta 21 movement was essentially worked on by multiple companies, including Patek Philippe, for instance, right? So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, you would be surprised because, for navigation, you still have these marine chronometers that you put on ships as a backup. Even if GPS fails and all of the stuff, you still have a very, very good timekeeping device on your ships. So you can actually navigate with the old technology, with a sextant and the time that you know exactly where you are in the world. And this is even AP and I think Patek, they have actually made these big, fat, even nuclear watches, right? These little atomic clocks. They actually you could buy, which was not cheap. I mean, Uhrwerk also still has one I think in their catalog. It's a big, like a suitcase. That's an amazing thing. But just explaining how quartz works. Quartz is a crystal, and this crystal has piezoelectrical. It's a piezoelectric material, let's say it this way. And if you put mechanical stress on it, it creates a tiny electrical charge. And that's how they discovered that this is weird. We squeeze a crystal and it emits electricity. And so some guy thought, oh, what if we do it the other way around? What if we put electrical charge towards the crystal? And then they figured out that then it starts vibrating. So wow. Eventually, they found a crystal that has a specific frequency of 32,768. And Martin is a binary person. He knows the binary system. So that is, I think, 2 times,
I have no idea.
10 or so, or 11. That means if you divide it by 2, you have 16,384. Then and so on, you go to 512, to 256, 128, 64, and so on. You end up at 1 if you divide it. Back in the days, it was very easy to have these transistors to just divide by 2. One on-off switch triggers another on-off switch, and it will always be reduced by half, right? Every tick-tock. And then eventually you have the last one that ticks on and off once per second. If the frequency of the quartz crystal, the starting frequency, is exactly 32,768 times a second. And that then can set a stepper motor to advance the time by 1 second. And that's why the quartz crystal is so important, and the swinging frequency of the crystal is so important. That's why Seiko and others actually grow their own quartz crystals in their own labs. And that's how they actually ended up with this. So it's basically the oscillating crystal with a stepper motor is the timekeeping thing instead of the the escapement with a balance wheel. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So no, it's obviously there's a few things here. One of the things that people say is, okay, well, we hate the tick, right? Well, technically speaking, a mechanical watch also ticks, right? It ticks, 8 times a second, depending on the vibration, the frequency of your movement, right?
Yes.
It could be 5, it could be 4, it could be 8, it could be
a 4 hertz movement. That means it ticks 8 times a second.
8 times,
because it's
exactly.
Always a tick-tock, right?
So we have 3 hertz movements, which click 6 times. I just recently heard that's 3.5 hertz movements. So there's a bunch of these, right? And you could have, of course, the 5 hertz movements from the quote unquote high frequency, high beat movements,
Zenith,
right? Which go 10.
Mm-hmm.
Zenith and Grand Seiko. So now here's the thing, they do tick. So is it possible to get a quartz watch to tick 10 times, 8 times a second? Absolutely.
Yes, it could even tick 32,768 times a second.
But the issue with this is battery life. They chose the 1 click per second to maximize the battery life. So every little tick would be a drain on that battery. And therefore, because you can't wind it up, you can't charge it up, they want it to last as long as humanly possible. And they found out that this 1 second was the golden standard. And that's why we get a tick, which is so funny because they arbitrarily came up with this.
Yeah, but I mean, the second was already there. So they thought, well, that fits, right?
Exactly.
It fits. And then the stepper motor does this for like a fraction of a second. And then for 99% of the second, it just stays dormant and doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
While the mechanical watch goes the whole time. Right?
Exactly.
It's continuously using energy.
Unless you have what's called a deadbeat function on your watch, which JLC did make a watch that did this. And essentially it is the biggest FU to quartz watches, I think.
I love that complication. I think this is so amazing. Cool. You're building a mechanical watch that looks like a quartz watch to everybody who doesn't know. But it's so complicated.
So all it does is tick
the true second
every
or the
second.
Second. Yeah.
They made up the story, I don't know how true this is, that this was made for engineers and doctors that need a second hand to measure things like pulses. Yeah, you don't need that. You don't need it to be exactly right. You can use an analog, not an analog, but they're all analog technically speaking, but a running seconds hand to get your blood pressure or whatever you need as well.
Correct.
But still funny. Funny that JLC did make this true second movement. And I think it's a pretty cool function. Yeah. And a bunch of people will think it's quartz.
Yeah. So what you said, what you want on a quartz watch, and what I have in my collection right now. I did have a few Grand Seikos, quartz. No, not a few. Actually, only one. And I really enjoyed this watch. Thinking about getting it again. It was a GMT. But this is where you think to a certain extent when you want a high-end quartz watch. If you look at these plus minus 5 seconds or plus minus 10 seconds a year, very, very high accuracy quartz watch. There you want obviously the
1 second a year. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you want something that is really well made. You have a very nice case, very nice dials and hands and all of the stuff. Obviously, it's Grand Seiko. And then you have just the movement is different. But even these movements that Grand Seiko builds are made by a watchmaker. They are built by a single person, put together. They're nicely decorated, have a couple of jewels. They have a service life of 50 years. They're hermetically sealed from the battery compartment. So that means you should give them, that's what they say, every 2-3 years you should bring them to the Grand Seiko boutique. So they will have a visual check, change the battery and check the water resistance, because you still have gaskets and stuff in your watch, right? As every watch has. But other than that, the movement itself has a service life of 50 years. Even though, because it's so well sealed, and it has these oils that are actually can last that long for the jewels and all of the stuff that are in there.
So I have had a number of quartz watches over time. I've had a few Timexes. I had a Tissot PRX.
You had this quartz watch. Oh, okay.
The 35 millimeter. Remember when the 35 came out?
Right.
It was only in quartz.
Okay.
So I had that for a hot second, the blue one. But the problem was I cannot get over the quartz. I just can't do it. I've tried. It's not happening. It's just me. But this is, once again, the funny thing is, when we look at this whole quartz revolution, quartz crisis, whichever side of the pond you're standing on, we cannot move away from this whole idea of the entire Swiss watch industry being decimated by the Japanese without talking about one brand, which we've already talked about today. Swatch.
Yes. The second watch.
This is a funny thing is I've seen this from multiple angles. Is it Swiss watch or is it truly second watch?
According to them, it's second watch.
But I've heard this from people that know better.
Yeah.
That have claimed that it is Swiss watch.
No, I think that's their marketing slogan in the beginning was that you have a fun second watch that you should.
Yes, that's a marketing slogan. That doesn't mean that's what the brand name came from.
Yeah, but it could be a play on the official version, right?
So I heard Tim Masso say Swiss watch. And Tim Masso tends to know his stuff.
So it says here, the name Swatch is a contraction of second watch. Its concept of low-cost, high-tech, artistic, and emotional watches marketed as casual, disposable accessories. And that is from the company history of the Swatch Group.
Where?
So, I can show you that. It's
is it on their website?
Yeah. It's on the Swatch Group website.
All right.
Yeah.
Then I will believe it.
It says here, 1983, the first Swatch is born. Nicholas J. Hayek's strategy included the creation of a low-cost, high-tech, artistic, and emotional Swiss-made second watch.
Did I tell you where they tested these second watches?
It's made from just 51 components. And usually a mechanical watch has at least 200. Yeah, some Panerais have a few less, but around 200. Components.
But the Panerais have less because they forgot to put them in. Now, a fun story about this is when Nicholas Hayek did come up with this watch.
Yeah.
He needed to find a test ground where people would wear them and it wouldn't make essentially the news.
Okay.
And the place that he felt was the perfect place for this was San Antonio, Texas.
What?
And apparently he gave 100 watches for almost, I don't know, I think it was like a year that were worn around San Antonio, Texas, which is of course where I went to university. And they wore these watches. And because the this, what they consider, I'm guessing the Swiss looked at this as like this backwards town in the middle of nowhere. They didn't care. No one cared. No one looked twice. They never made it into the news. There was one news article that came out like a decade later saying that the small town that helped the Swiss fight back against the Japanese quartz invasion, which is so randomly ridiculous that
that is interesting.
And this was, by the way, this story was said by Nicholas Hayek himself. I looked for this article. I couldn't find it. I cannot find anything on.
Just Googled for it. I couldn't find anything.
Cannot find anything on it. Yeah. But this was an interview with Nicholas Hayek for Hodinkee a long, long time ago, probably like 2018, that he told this story. And
you mean the not senior?
No, the junior. The junior.
The junior, who's also quite
the junior. And I'm guessing he knows what he's talking about, but I can't find a single thing about this.
Interesting.
But I listened to that. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. And it would make sense. The whole point was to keep it under wraps so the Japanese wouldn't know what the Swiss have planned. So, but they had to test them to make sure that they were reliable enough to pump out in the mass quantities that they were planning. Yeah. So this was done in like 1981 or 1982. And then the actual release of Swatch was 83.
And I find it so amazing that the Swatch, the Quartz Swatch, I mean, Swatch also makes mechanical movements, right? They have their own System 51 and some other movements that they have used in the period of time. They have also done normal mechanical movements in some of their watches. Very rarely, but they have done that. And, what I find extremely funny is how this Swatch was really dying, right? We know that in most of the malls we had a Swatch boutique, even the smaller malls, like the Marina Mall or so, the Dubai Marina. And then eventually all of these little boutiques in the smaller malls was closed down because how many of these watches can you sell in a day, right? Because they were not so popular anymore. And then the Moon Swatch came and completely reinvigorated the entire brand, right? Not just Moon swatches were selling like hotcakes, but also the other swatches just became more popular again, right? So I think it's amazing of how much that has done for this brand, right? This little Moon Swatch idea that they have came up with.
Yep.
Yeah. But you know, when we talked about the ticking, there's one thing that I took a small note of because I just can't believe how loud Swatch watches tick. I mean, there is ticking.
I don't understand. It's ridiculous.
But it's like amplified by, I don't know the case or the plastic. I have no idea. But my Moon Swatch, if it lies on my nightstand, I have to put it in the drawer. I can't sleep. It's too loud. The ticking is insanity.
Yeah. My wife has to put it into a drawer and put it away.
Exactly. Me too. I have to put it in the drawer and really hide it because otherwise it's very, very loud. It's crazy how loud they tick. But I had so many swatches in my lifetime because that was, the ironies, the metal cases and the metal bracelet watches, and so many of these chronographs, and I really loved them. I mean, they were just, I don't know how many years I wore just these swatches before, I started spending way more money on watches than was probably healthy.
I know how you feel. Anyway. So this is a fun story about Swatch and how it kind of came about.
And but the other thing, some kind of, maybe we go to the way back archive and all of these things on the internet and find something. There must be somewhere where we can find and collaborate the story, or otherwise we just think that drunk. Martin has dreamed it up.
Yeah, it could be. I'm trying to find something. I did find that one of the early setbacks of Swatch was that in Houston, which is also strange. Once again, here we are in Texas. And this was in 83 that they made a deal with Bloomingdale's, which is a Dallas or I think is Dallas based, right?
Is it? I don't know.
Company that to buy 10,000 swatches. And which, once again, here we are in Texas in the 80s, and apparently the owner of Bloomingdale's refused.
Oh.
Because they said they don't want to be associated with such a cheap product.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That I do see. So that apparently Swatch was banking on having these 10,000 sales, and they didn't want it.
Wow, that is interesting. I mean, Bloomingdale's is from New York City. It was founded in New York City, but I mean, that was where their first shop was. But yeah, don't see.
So here, since both the Swiss watch industry and the Swiss market were traditionally conservative at that time, a new watch was introduced to the U.S. market in 1982. A limited quantity of 10,000 watches was to be put on sale in Houston. These were supposed to be the first ones ever to be sold, by the way. 10,000 watches were to be put on sale in Houston, Texas. Although this was a commercial failure, it provided a valuable lesson. The design had to be changed because the first Swatch models did not differ significantly from the traditional mechanical watches, and the marketing effort had to be more intense. Consequently, Marvin Traub, CEO of Bloomingdale's, requested 2 collections per year with at least 20 different models each in both colorful and designer watches.
Wow.
So apparently they originally launched in Texas and failed. So maybe this is what he was talking about. He misspoke and said San Antonio instead of. So because I remember it was a round number, so 10,000 would be it.
Yeah.
So they originally launched first in Houston. Then, this is an article. What's it called? Academic article about the early days of Swatch, the birth and fast fashion watch business model. So this I trust more than Nicholas Hayek Jr., but he must have mixed up the idea. And the idea of what he mentioned was they wanted to test it out in somewhere where people didn't know what it was.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So makes sense. Makes sense. But I mean, you have these little places. I think we have one in Germany as well, which is the most average of average cities and towns that you can find, right? Where everything is just super average. The people live there, have an average salary. The people live there, have average hobbies. They're just so average that a lot of companies test their supermarkets, in their supermarkets there, they're testing new products. So just to see what is the reaction to people, do they, fall for the marketing, yes or no, and all of this stuff. It's pretty interesting to see how this can, be used when you find a place that is just like that.
Yeah. But now I'm on a rabbit hole trying to figure out where Bloomingdale's is based out of. They're not based out of Houston. They're based out of New York.
Yeah. They were founded in New York.
So what the hell did this whole thing have to do with Houston?
I just told you that.
Why would they launch in
New York? First store.
Yeah. So this is what's strange. So it had nothing to do with Houston, but that's where they were originally going to launch, at Bloomingdale's in Houston. 10,000 watches only in Houston. Which is super weird.
Test market. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, that's what he said was a test market. But the logic of as probably, well, as you said, it's the most average place that you could find where you would see if this sold, but it failed.
Yeah, I mean, Swatch had a lot of things that didn't work, right? For example, we had also. Did you know that Swatch has their own time? The Swatch Beat?
Yes, the Swatch Beat. Yes, we talked about this.
That didn't work because they wanted to, instead of having different time zones and just having to translate the time, saying like 3 p.m. is different anywhere in the world. Why don't we have just internet time or the Switch internet time beats or whatever? And they divided the entire solar day into 1,000 parts called beats. So every beat would last 86.4 seconds. So you had or 1.44 minutes in standard time. So the time of the day begins at midnight, and then at 248 beats, that would be then, well, I don't know, that would be 248
so
of
ridiculous.
1,000s. That would be just just 5 hours and 57 minutes or something. It obviously a completely arbitrary number didn't actually go down so well. Like a day is 1,000 and then you just go around until you have 1,000 and then, but this would be the same everywhere in the world. So you would say, theoretically, that's a very smart idea, because if you wanted to meet somebody or have a phone call with somebody, you could tell them, we are meeting at 5,077 beats. And that would be the same time everywhere in the world.
You can use GMT time. GMT time. The same time everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole point of it?
it's sure.
But
you can do this
all right.
thing with GMT.
So
but it wouldn't be from Swatch, right? You couldn't license the time.
You couldn't say it. Now, all right. Here's the last thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
If you get to choose, let's say any 5 Quartz watches to add to your collection, what 5 watches are you choosing? Or let's say 3. Let's make it easier. I'm assuming we're going to have overlap here.
Okay.
So what is the first one you would go for?
The first one is is the SBGN 009 Grand Seiko. It's a GMT. That's the one that I had with the blue dial, a 50th anniversary watch that I would get. The second one is a Citizen Chronomaster. The Citizen Chronomaster. They have now 40 millimeter watches with a nice Japanese washi paper dials. Super cool watch. 5 seconds a year deviation maximum plus minus, and then Echo Drive. And they have the same polishing and finishing as Grand Seiko. Wonderful watches. Cost a couple of $1,000. So they're really, really well made. And the third one would be probably a G-Shock metal or titanium or carbon or something like that.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with you on that one.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna be the same. I'm gonna start with that one as well. I'm gonna say I would go for either the carbon black, the all carbon, or I would go for the MRG titanium in the silver color.
Yeah.
Both of those are ridiculous. And then I would go for an FP Journe Elegance.
Oh, I forgot. Yes. Also very cool.
Yeah, buddy. That one is super cool. And then for my ultimate last one, I would go for a Oyster Quartz D-Date.
I forgot about these because they're not current production. I don't know why.
No, they're not. They don't have to be current. But I think the Elegante and the Oyster Quartzes are absolutely phenomenal. The Oyster Quartzes are kind of now picking up. That's another one of these movements, by the way, that isn't. And I might also, by the way, since we're here, 2 other notable mentions for me would be the Breitling, what is it called? The one with the dual time?
Yes.
Top time.
No.
Flightmaster?
No, what are they called?
What is it called?
Aerospace?
The Breitling Aerospace. And the second one, that's an honorable mention, which is in the same vein, would be the X33 Omega Speedmaster.
By the way, the Aerospace is from Breitling. Also, they have a high accuracy quartz movement in it, but this is plus minus 15 seconds a year. They have chronometers specified, even for quartz movements. They have a different spec.
Then the same thing happened with the Rolexes too.
Yeah.
So the Rolexes and the Breitlings, what they had in common is they were both temperature regulated, right?
Yeah, for high accuracy, you have to do this.
So
because the quartz crystal swings at different frequencies in different temperatures. So the watch actually measures the temperature inside the movement and then adjusts for these inaccuracies of the crystal, because only then you can get these kind of accuracy. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I would go for. So anyway, yeah. So even though I hate quartz, I have to say, I would totally wear any of those 3 watches that I just named off, or 5 in that case.
The Breitlings are super cool. I like them as well. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. On that bombshell, it's the end of quartz.
Yeah. This is the end of quartz. All right. And on that, bye-bye.